Hi, good afternoon everyone. My name's Chris Tadulu. I'm the CEO of Saddington Baynes. We're a creative production studio here in London, and we work mainly in the realm of stills and digital. Unlike some of the other people who are going to speak at the show, we've always focused on super high res, super high quality still imagery for the marketing and advertising industry. Been in business 20 years, and in that time we've seen effectively 3 digital revolutions. The first one happened in 2D back in the late 80s, early 90s, followed by digital photography, and then following that 3D CGI, which is a relative newcomer to the world of the marketing industry. Certainly it's been a big thing in games and movies for quite a long time now, but the marketing industry's only been able to wake up to it relatively recently, because the lead times for projects in this industry are a lot shorter than you would get in games and movies. Consequently, the technology was never quite fast enough or good enough to actually keep up the demands of turning around super high quality imagery quickly using 3D techniques. The specific area I want to discuss today is about creating virtual worlds for brands and how significant that's become in the last couple of years with the increases in speeds, technology, and the sort of techniques that I'm going to show you today. Kicking off with this image here, classic example. The agency we work with had a stock shot of something similar to this, and they needed it to be printed within airports and super-sized posters all over the world, and the stock shot wasn't a good enough resolution. So essentially, the only way this could be created in the time that they had was to do it all in 3D. So this entire image is CGI. It's all been done at incredibly high resolutions to withstand the sort of needs of the advertising industry. So with regards to virtual worlds for brands, I want to talk about how they've become the most versatile tool for today's marketing industry, and that's the area that we work in, the media industries, advertising, marketing, print, digital, online, tablet spaces. And essentially, because of what we've seen in the last 20 years, the restricting factor that seemed to always be there when it came to creating digital materials in 3D was the limitation of the physical world itself. You needed to go to certain locations at certain times and wait for the sun to be in a certain position before you can take a picture, or you've got to ship the latest top secret version of a car from Europe to Australia under huge clouds of secrecy and great cost to take one picture of it as the sun goes down. And all of those sort of logistics that continue to be the case are slowly falling away, because with the advent of 3D and the technologies that are out there now, we're able to start putting vehicles into locations anywhere in the world without the need to actually transport it, just using 3D CAD information. So with regards to what I'm going to talk about today, why is there a need to create virtual worlds for brands? What is it that's driving this? And I'm going to talk a little bit about that and why that's happening more and more, and frame that from the point of view of what this means both for the 3D industry in general, the marketing industry, and also for anyone who's aspiring to be an artist going forward. Also going to talk to you about a virtual world we're creating at the moment for a very large brand that you'll all be very familiar with when I show you it. And also what that means to that brand, what that means to brands who can actually own their own physical virtual space, if I can call it that, and some key points to take away at the end of it. This reminds me, when I'm a retoucher by trade, if you like. I've always worked in the 2D industry, but pushed our business into the 3D space about 8 years ago now, when we started seeing trends for automotive marketers who needed to start showing vehicles that hadn't been built yet. And the only thing they had was CAD data. And we're able to take that 3D data direct from the marketing company and actually turn it into imagery for digital and online. And there's been a huge demand for imagery because of the increases in mobile devices, tablets, online, everything shifting away from the traditional marketing mediums of TV and print. And that's been great for 3D. There's an insatiable thirst for imagery now. And 3D itself is one of the best tools and one of the best solutions for that photography alone won't be able to satisfy. So this reminds me of a story when I was retouching 20 years ago. We were working on a machine which is no longer around, called a graphic paint box. It was the machine of the time, the Photoshop of its day, before Photoshop had even been created. And essentially we're looking at a 2D photograph of a yacht in St Ives on sailing, and she said to me, "Can you turn the yacht round so I can see the other side?" Which is actually quite funny, because she was quite visionary in some ways, because in some ways you can do that now, but it was funny at the time anyway. But what I wanted to talk about is, what do we bring for brands? As a company, we've been looking at imagery for 20 years in the same way that other companies look at movies and games. And what we're bringing to brands is the sort of skills that you see in the 2D industry, taking photographs, doing colour grading on them, the sort of techniques you'd see in movies such as matte painting, colour grading, compositing. All of those skills are all inherently built into 2D. Now, the way to utilise those skills is to actually be able to think and see in 3D as an artist and translate those thoughts and those visuals into actually 2D space. So the ability to understand lighting, distance, perspective, all of those things are hugely, hugely important in making you a good 2D artist, and even more so when you want to be a great 3D artist. So these are just examples of some of the things that we've done in 2D over the years. You know, the number of hours that went into this picture, I couldn't begin to tell you. It's hundreds of hours that went into this, because you just couldn't find that location. You have to do it. We had to do this in 2D. In an ideal world, we'd probably use something like View and try and do this in 3D if we could, but you know, a photographer wants to do it. So, and then we start combining our 3D skills into the 2D space to actually begin to help photographers realise things, and agencies realise things that they couldn't do ordinarily. So this house of cards was for a shelter campaign for a charity, and we like doing charity work because some of that stuff's really creative and also makes us feel good. So this was all built in 3D by Kevin, who's in here somewhere, our CT supervisor, but using real world techniques, understanding how playing cards work when you actually stack them up. Creating visual effects for brands like Lucozade, creating this branded asset that can be used across all of their ads. This set the tone for the TV campaign as well, which was done by Absolute Post. And setting ourselves challenges. You know, we like to challenge ourselves, and we want to push just to see how far we can go with 3D. You know, can we create a fully photorealistic piglet in 3 weeks? That was our challenge, and that's what we did. This is called Hamlet, by the way. And so, taking imagery, taking techniques that exist in the film world and the TV world, and bringing them into the marketing space is very much part of what we do. And bringing those technologies to marketers, because they're not available to them internally. They don't have the skills and the actual technology to be able to create imagery like this themselves. This is the sort of stuff that we're able to create. Moving into automotive, this was the catalyst that got us into 3D in the first place. As retouchers of automotive for so long, we understand cars, we understand photography, so we're able to create completely virtual cars in virtual environments like this one for marketing purposes. The same with interiors, bringing a level of photographic reality to in-car interiors as well. This is for Honda, one of our clients, who've completely gone virtual now, so they no longer photograph their cars for marketing, because we create all the imagery in 3D for them, for their tablets, their iPads, their everything. Even stuff like this, conceptual work like this, complete 3D bank vault with a gold car. Again, being able to take that further, really bring skills to this that are inherently built into photography in 3D. So why is there a need to create virtual worlds for brands, and what's brought this on? What we've found over the years, as we're all consumers in this room, we all get seduced and attracted by branding and marketing, and it's all very subliminal. It's very much directed at us to make us make purchases, to buy that particular product that people want us to buy. And everyone looks for that visual hook, that visual link that makes you attach yourself to a brand. Apple in particular have been brilliant at that. They've been able to create a visual style to their advertising, a visual style to their branding, their stores, their products, that seduces you and makes you want to buy one. I mean, I know it's worked on me. I've got everything they've got, and I love what they do. And they've captured a part of the market because of the way they've designed everything from branding upwards. And that works on a deep level, and we need to understand that as artists to be able to create worlds that satisfy that need. So whatever you might feel about smoking, this has been a very, very successful campaign over the years for Marlboro. They created this view of the world, this idealistic view of how the world should be, even though, you know, it was contrary to some degree to what their product actually does. People bought into it. People bought into the fact that if you bought Marlboro cigarettes, this is what you would actually be experiencing. not technically the case, but who cares, right? It worked for them. It worked for them for a very long time. Sadly, the original cowboy in this actually died of lung cancer. This was a very powerful thing, and it worked for years for Marlboro, and it's something they still continue to do. You know, here's an example of how using virtual spaces can be more powerful than physical ones. Here's a location in Spain. This is a photo studio in Spain that has this particular vista that it uses, and car brands are attracted to it. So they go and photograph it. So here's a Bugatti, which is all about attainable lifestyles, aspiration, power, you know, desire, etc. Here's a Peugeot, which is all about desire and aspiration. Same thing, same location, same time of day. You're basically seeing different brands using the same location and borrowing the same styling cues to actually link themselves to that same look. Here's Vauxhall doing the same thing in the same location. So you can see all of these car brands are essentially trying to do different things and separate themselves from each other, but are actually ending up looking the same. So for the consumer, for you looking at that, you're like, well, I don't get it. You're all looking the same to me. How can I attach myself to you and become loyal as a customer? Because all of us ultimately attach ourselves to brands and become loyal to them, whether we know why or not, we do. Whether we follow them on Twitter, whether we like their Facebook pages, whether we buy their products. All of that's been done at a subliminal level through the branding, and that's what all of this imagery is about. And for us as a company, perhaps differently to some of the others you're going to see here, this is very much about that. This is very much about creating that aspirational, beautiful, desirable image that's going to make you feel something for that brand when you see it. So what does this mean for everyone as artists, as 3D people? This actually means greater creative influence. It means that we as artists, using the technology and the skills that we have, you know, photographically and creatively, have actually a huge amount of influence going forward in how to build worlds virtually that a brand owns, that it no longer looks to the real world for that location. It no longer decides it's going to shoot where everybody else is. It decides to create its own. And it's only through the power of 3D that that happens. And here's a brand that we're working with currently, that you may know, called Intel, where we've done just that. So essentially, Intel consulted with us and decided that they wanted a world of their own. They wanted a world that was specific to them, that nobody else had, because they were building and changing their brand from being Intel inside, being this chip manufacturer, to actually tell us all that they do much more than that. They actually influence a big part of our lives, because 80% of the world's computers and devices have Intel chips inside them. So ultimately, what the story they now want to tell is that Intel influences everyday life. It's there, it's part of our world. And in doing so, we had to understand what that meant. It was a continuous flow. They had this continuous flow that they wanted to get across, that everything's connected, everything's one. So that informed the design of this architectural space. So this architectural space, if we wanted it to, could be built for real. It actually conforms to the rules of architecture today and could be built, but actually isn't real, it's virtual. And it's big enough for us to go wherever we want inside it and take essentially virtual photographs in any part of that space, and actually set the clock on the time of day and light it any way we want and add any camera we want to it. So here's another example of that space outside. Different time of day, different environment, something else going on. Same again here. Same space, different part of that space. This space itself in actual size is probably twice the size of Wembley Stadium in terms of how we've actually built it, and you can go anywhere in that space. Here's another viewpoint from a different part, outside, different time of day again. And again, you can see the sort of level of texturing and lighting that we're able to apply to it. And it's a very flexible, versatile way for Intel to create multiple images without having to go to the same location again and again, worry about the weather. Is it going to rain today? You know, taking a massive crew that you have to feed all the time. That's all gone now, because this is particular to them. Here's one more space, which again, completely different part, built, designed and constructed specifically to fit in with Intel's brand values. And again, the same here, but bringing icons into the mix and a different time of day. So this is an ongoing project for us. We've already completed over 50 images for this campaign in the first 6 months, all of them rendered at 12,000 pixel by 9,000 pixel resolution, so they fit and work in any size. That in itself created a level of technical complexity that we had to solve above and beyond the creative stuff. And Kevin, who's here, will be talking in the V-Ray discussion later on about why we actually use V-Ray for this particular project. What is the value of virtual worlds? What does it mean for a brand to have that? Essentially means that that brand becomes completely distinctive from any other brand. It means it's separated from any other brand visually, and it means that you can actually do more with those assets. And the next phase of the Intel project for us is to begin the animations of that world, to actually start animating and doing fly-throughs and ads and digital spaces and digital media that can be used on iPads interactively with users. So a big value of creating all this stuff in 3D, of course, is what you can do with it afterwards. So they recognise that going up front and doing all of this in 3D gives them far more down the road, and we're already in the process of animating some stuff for them, which will be the next generation of assets, and we go further on from that and combine it with video. What about other, if I use Marlboro again, this is Marlboro today. This is a different brand of Marlboro, different product, completely different brand style. They came to us through their ad agency with a bunch of sketches. What can we do with that? How do we show that this is a cigarette that's actually got a menthol filter in it? Sounds horrible to me, but somebody likes it. And they wanted to create this very technical, cool, high-tech kind of reality for this particular product, because that's how they saw it. That's what the effect that they felt this would have on people when they actually experienced this product. So again, bringing our design skills, our technical skills into the mix, this is one of the worlds that we created for this particular brand. This is another one, completely designed from scratch, utilising our design skills, our creative skills, creating incredibly complex, incredibly intricate worlds that need to look like real photographs. And that's ultimately what drives us on, that's what floats our boat as artists, is to go to this level of detail and intricacy to create incredibly complex imagery that will actually live beyond the scope of this particular brand and this particular ad. Here's another one. Same idea, same product, but another different execution. All of them about expressing a feeling. All of them expressing how you're actually going to feel when you experience this product in the same way that Intel have done. You know, so this is the value of a world that can be built for a brand, where you can actually take it further than you would through a straight photograph. Here's another one. You know, here's another idea, being able to visualize essentially the 007 Bond testing station, which is what this is all about, a conceptual piece of work. No 3D data existed for the car, we modelled it. With flotation tank, we modelled it, the background and the people are photographed. But being able to do this sort of thing, you would never be able to do photographically before, even with desktop models. You know, you just can't go to this level of intricacy and scale. And the problem that you have photographically is if you built a desktop model of this and photographed it, is the issue of scale. You know, the way lighting hits an object when it's small on a desk is different to the way lighting hits an object when it's huge, the way this would be. Another one, another brand using an image for themselves, a room that doesn't exist, a virtual space that is specific to that brand, that is actually modern but retro at the same time. So you're bringing together and you're fusing elements of architecture, interior design, and lighting and photography all into one studio. And it's incredibly exciting for us as a studio to go beyond the realms of 2D and retouching straight photography to actually creating photography that's virtual, but actually has a huge amount of value to a client, but also gives us as artists an enormous amount of flexibility and skill to actually bring to the table. Here's another one. This is about Deutsche Bank. They wanted to represent their logo, the Deutsche Bank logo in blue there, in many different ways. This is just one example, creating this hub, this 3D space, again, all built and all created in 3D, and essentially created to look like a photograph at the end. So the versatility is there, but for us as artists, huge amount of flexibility and fun, essentially, because we've got more influence than we've ever had before. Because now, the whole process is digital. You know, digital photography, digital 3D space, and digital retouching are all gone that way. So there is nothing that can't be done anymore within the realms of budgets and timeframes. Here's another example. So there's an example of a world we created for a watch, essentially taking that need, that desire to show that it's a future-proof watch. It's got its eye on the future, but it's also very hard, very rigid, and you know, unbreakable pretty much. And being able to fuse that into a virtual world, art direct it, concept it, build this world specifically for this brand, which now owns that world. And this is something that brands have never been able to do before, whether it's car brands, watch brands, fashion brands, or otherwise. It's expanded the range of skills and the range of media that we as 3D artists can actually influence, whereas before we didn't have as much influence because, you know, mainly in the games and TV and film industries, that's where it all was. But there's another world out there now where, you know, worlds are being created for brands that give us all as artists an enormous amount of influence. It's a very exciting thing to be considering. So key points to take away. What can we take from all of this? It essentially means that the scope for creation is growing, the scope for actually creating worlds that don't exist is growing, and that gives us the power to actually influence a lot more, as I said earlier. It also means that it brings a whole range of skills into a 3D studio like ours, such as architecture and interior design, photography. All of those skills can be dialed in as artists, and the more that you know about those things, the more powerful as an artist you can become, because ultimately it's not just about modelling or texturing or rendering or lighting anymore, it's also about architecture, design, photography. All of those things are fused into these processes to actually create a very powerful tool for us, and actually gives us a lot more power to actually be more useful to a brand and actually allow that brand to own these images and actually do more with them in the future. It becomes especially powerful when you consider that ultimately branded worlds are valuable from so many different ways and allow you to do a lot more, especially when the talent and the people in those worlds are virtual as well. This image here is our first project that we've done recently where the talent in it, the Kendo warrior, is actually 3D as well. And he's been created for the same reason as the environment's been created. The client wants an asset, they want this person to appear in their ads for the next 5 to 7 years. They don't want him to age. They always want him to be available. They want him to be wearing the same clothes, and they don't want to keep going back into a studio and photographing him every single time, and with all the resultant costs and infrastructure and logistics of actually, you know, shooting the same person time and time again with the same photographer and repeating the spend on money and everything else. So this is the vision of the future and where it's all going ultimately. This is the first image that we've done. There are another 3 in the pipeline. He's also been fully rigged and textured to be animated. We're working on rigging his face in the future so that he can actually talk. So this is, again, bringing techniques that we all know and love from the movie industry, but into a completely different industry. And that means great things for us, and it's an exciting future ahead. So on that note, I'd just like to say thank you. If anyone wants to throw any questions at me, you know, feel free on any of the images you've seen today, or anything that piques your interest.
What's the need for photographers and advertising then?
Yes, I do actually. I mean, this doesn't negate the need for photographers actually, because there are always going to be certain types of imagery that is served best by photography, to be honest. Certain lifestyle imagery to some degree that has a certain feel, a certain natural look to it that is required, comes from photography as well. But we work with photographers closely as well in terms of some of the virtual worlds that we've created. But we feel that in certain instances the role of the photographer has changed. They're not kind of pushed out anymore, they just have a different role. There are certain things that we photograph ourselves because they might be procedural things, textures, we need texture maps or whatever to actually create. As we did with our Kendo warrior there was a very specific photo shoot for that allowed us to dial in using Mari to create the actual texture maps to map onto the ZBrush model. So photography is still very valid and it will always be the case. You know, there are worlds out there that can still be photographed, but there are also worlds out there that don't exist, and I think they can live together ultimately. Anybody else? No? Hi there.
Yeah, in the next whole virtual, are there any advertising rules about corresponding to reality talking about advertising standards and guidelines.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, with products, obviously there is an element of guidelines where you've actually got to represent the real product, because you could get into consumer laws and things like that. When you're representing worlds, though, they tend to be metaphors. They're not real. They're visual metaphors for something else, a message that someone wants to get across. So the Japanese kendo warrior is a visual metaphor. The Intel image is a visual metaphor. So you can actually, you've got far more freedom and license to do things with that you couldn't do in the real world. But when you're dealing with products like the Honda car or the Infinity car, yeah, you've got to be accurate with that because you don't want to be mis-selling that product. But yeah, fair question. But that's where certain brands are now looking for visual metaphors as the main way of putting the emotion of that brand across, so that they're not restricted by those sorts of rules. But yeah, good question. Anyone else? No?
For the internal one, once you've built the whole model, how much time do you give yourself to complete all
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we created roughly, 50 images in 6 months, and the design phase, which nearly killed Kevin, who's in here, that was really compacted, so we had to design on the fly. But yeah, each image at 12K is an enormous undertaking, and can take a day or so to render, even on V-Ray. So with all the resultant layers that you need to render as well. But yeah, they all we try and turn one out every 2 or 3 days if we can. It's just the nature of the beast, really, and then you've got to retouch everything in as well into 2D to bring everything together. But yeah, in an ideal world you'd have more time than that, but that's how much time we had. But we've now developed a workflow that allows us to turn them out every 3 days or so. And that's acceptable for the client within the time space of, so it's a 2-year ongoing project, so there's going to be an awful lot of imagery being created. But they've bought into the whole idea of having this world that belongs to them. And is actually specific to them. So yeah, they accept that it's going to take the time it takes.
Once you basically send off the draft, do they sort of type it up and they send it back, or is there basically once you've done with that?
No, the process can't unfortunately be as cut and dried as that. You have to obviously, because you now have a location, you can now go wherever you want to in that location, but you need to then show them what that location is going to be before you then go to final render, as it were. So yeah, we do a bunch of previs stuff, using real-time previs. So we'll do some previs and say, okay, where do you want to go? We'll move the cameras and move position to get where we want to get. They sign off on that rough position, and then we can move on from there. And then, oh no, that's a separate process. You do all of that stuff up front. So you do all your location scouting, if you like, up front within the 3D space. You then decide on the lighting for each shot. You do some lighting studies. So it's almost like a pre-shoot. And then when they've signed off on that, that's when you go to full-on high-res rendering. Yeah. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that today. It's an exciting world out there, actually, and if any of you are considering which career you should go into or what kind of 3D you want to be doing, games and film have certainly got their attractions, but this is another area of the industry that's growing incredibly quickly, and is having more influence because of the digital media and the film, and the print, because there's a lot of budget moving from TV into digital media. And that's actually the interesting thing about digital media and online is it's not regulated. So there's more scope to do wild and wacky things that you wouldn't necessarily get away with on TV, because TV is regulated much more. So the scope for creativity online is actually greater, and gives us as artists an awful lot of scope to be as creative as possible. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. And if anyone wants to pop over and say anything or say hello, then feel free.
How many people each image goes to, do you give a job for one person, the person has to make it in the model?
Well, as an artist, you mean? As an artist?
Yeah.
It tends to be shared because, the nature of the project means that you, like a movie, you need your lighting TDs and your modelling guys and your tech supervisors. You do have a team, and they tend to focus on specific things because, you do get eyes who are great at everything. But on a project of this nature and this scope, you do need to have a team, a very tight team, who focus on key things. So we had a modelling team who were designing all the furniture there, because everything in those shops, for Intel for instance, is specific. It's all been designed from scratch. So as well as the architectural language behind it, there's all of the design of all the props and the desks and the benches and the lampposts and everything. So we had a team working on that, headed up by Kevin, and then we had a lighting team which very much focused on the lighting and the texturing, and the rendering, and then you had your sort of 2D retouching team, compositing team that brought it all together at the end. And yeah, it worked. It was a sort of, I think we did that with 7 people, so it turned out 50 pictures, 7 people in 6 months from scratch, which is quite an undertaking, I must say. But now the ground rules are set, and we have all those assets, and we've built that world. Turning out imagery from now on will be a lot easier. Okay. Like I say, if anyone wants to come over and say hello, feel free, and I hope you found that useful. Thanks very much for your time.